So, admittedly, a little late, but it's time for my five worst movies of 2015. Uh, I want to start off with a bit of a disclaimer. Admittedly, this year I did not see quite as much as I did last year. So, because of that, I was a little choosier on what I saw. Last year, I saw some real terrible movies that I probably would not have otherwise seen. This year, I was a bit choosier, and well, I did see some stuff I thought was going to be bad. I didn't see some stuff that I had no interest in and knew would just be complete garbage no matter what. Everything I saw this year, I at least had some curiosity, even if I thought it was going to be bad. So let's get started. Number five on my list is The Gallows. It's a found footage horror movie about a handful of kids who are locked at a school overnight. I think it's three or four of them. I don't even remember. I think it's four. They're involved in their school play that involves a hangman's noose that 20 years ago someone at the school was killed doing the same play. When the hangman's noose malfunctioned, it actually hung the guy. So now they think he's haunting the school. Found footage movies are generally never too great, but this was the probably the worst one I've ever seen. It was like an hour and like 15 minutes long, and even at an hour and 15 minutes long, it still dragged. It had like really old school mean spirited bullying for a character that's like not even the antagonist, which I thought was a little weird. I know they're trying to get me to not like the character, but they seem to take that a little too far, and I hated this character, and kind of the movie too as a result of that. It's boring, it's uninteresting, the twist is lame, and you see it coming for a reasonable amount of time. They kind of telegraph it a bit. It's a giant waste of time. Number four on my list is Ted 2. It's the second year in a row Seth MacFarlane has an appearance on my list. I absolutely hated A Million Ways to Die in the West, and maybe I should have avoided this, but I remember liking the first Ted. I remember being pleasantly surprised when it came out and thought that was decent. So and I figured I'd go into this one again, and while it probably wouldn't be great, maybe it would be alright. And I hated this movie. I saw it with a friend, and he and I sat silently in the theater while the entire theater around us laughed quite a bit. So we were certainly in the minority there, not enjoying it, but I really did not enjoy it. The movie has one of my pet peeves, which is just, I don't even want to say jokes about weed, just jokes where the only punchline is weed. Like, at one point, the character just pulls out a bong and starts smoking, and like the theater started laughing, and I don't get why that's funny. I get some people who smoke weed might like seeing like-minded individuals, but it's not like people who smoke weed are some very small group of people. There's a decent amount of people who smoke weed. I don't get why it's a big deal that like, oh man, they're just like me. The teddy bear is not like you. He's a teddy bear. But the jokes were like mostly really lazy. I found the plot boring and kind of just redoing the first one. It was just a mess start to finish. I thought none of the jokes worked. I thought the story was boring. I thought it went way too long and drug. Anytime I have a comedy that I don't think is funny and I find kind of frustrating and boring and long, that's just the recipe for something I'm going to hate. So I really hated that movie. The next two movies on my list, I'm actually very disappointed to say are on this list. In the case of both movies, they're new, interesting, unique ideas, which we don't have enough of in movies now. And they were big swings taken by interesting directors, and in both cases, they fell flat on their face. I'm really sad to say they both failed, but they did. Number three on my list is Jupiter Ascending from the Wachowskis. It's I heard it was bad, and I still wanted to see it. I wanted to judge for myself. I thought it couldn't be as bad as people said, because people like to jump on things and really beat it to death. But I gotta say, this movie was terrible, and I was really sad it was terrible. But it was a mess. The acting was terrible. The story was atrocious. It was overly long. It was kind of boring. It was all start to finish a disaster. It was genuinely one of the worst things I've ever seen, and it was almost embarrassing. But honestly, I will still go see the next thing the Wachowskis put out. I look forward to it. They're interesting. They have interesting ideas. They make interesting movies. This one didn't work out. They haven't had a hit in a while. I really like Cloud Atlas from a couple years ago, But outside of that, I think it's going back to the first Matrix, so they have something that was really good, but this was not it. So let's get past it, move on. Hopefully, the next Wachowski's movie is better. Number two on my list, similar story, is Tomorrowland. I I wanted to like it. I thought it looked decent. I was a little skeptical on the trailers, but I'm like, it's got a lot of hype. It seems like it's gonna be good. It's directed by Brad Bird, who had done The Incredibles, who did Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol. So hopefully it'll be at least decent. I heard one critic praising the movie really highly before it came out, so I got kind of excited. And man, it was awful. I can't remember the last movie that I was disinterested this quick in. It had lost my interest about 15 minutes into the movie. And anytime you lose my interest, it's really tough to get it back. And this movie just did no favors for doing that. It was stupid and terrible, made no sense. I didn't think the acting was particularly bad, although I didn't think the lead actress was particularly good in it, although nobody really was. It was just a really unfortunate, bad movie. Hopefully, next time around, Brad Bird does better. Again, this is a guy with a decent resume. I don't want to harp on it too much. In the case of Seth MacFarlane and whoever was responsible for the Gallows, I'm not willing to really give them the benefit of the doubt because I'm not that sold on the rest of what they've done. But this was a new, interesting idea that was just not done very well. But it was truly an awful movie that I would not want to watch again. And my worst movie of the year. Last year, my worst movie of the year was Left Behind, which was the Nicolas Cage remake of the really Christian movie starring Kirk Cameron. And I said that was the worst movie because I wasn't sure it really constituted a movie. And if you want to have a movie that's Christian and got Christian messages, that's fine. But it should at least be a decent movie. And I really felt like Left Behind wasn't a movie. It seemed like at times the plot stopped so they could go into like almost infomercial pitches on Christianity. But it seemed like the movie would stop. It honestly seemed like it was made by someone who's never seen a movie. So I said it was the worst movie of the year because I wasn't even positive it was a movie. And once again this year, I don't know if the worst movie of the year really constitutes a movie. And that was Fantastic Four. The first 45 minutes of it, it wasn't great, but I was kind of interested. I thought it was all right. It was an interesting like sci-fi movie more than a superhero movie by that point, but it was all right. And then they get their powers, and everything goes south so fast. It gets kind of boring. Then like the bad guy shows up, and like we're first introduced to him, and then immediately in the final battle. Apparently, there's a lot of behind the scenes issues that the studio got involved and completely like reshot the end of the movie. What I interpreted it, now maybe my interpretation is wrong, but what I interpreted it as being was they kind of reshot the end. It still didn't work, and they kind of just decided like, let's put it out. It'll make a bunch of money anyway. And it kind of didn't do great at the box office. The critics hated it. The reason I say I don't know if it constitutes a movie is I don't think this was made to be like a form of storytelling. I think what the studio took it as was just we're going to make some money, put it out to make money. That they had originally tried to make a regular movie, but they had kind of stumbled, and when they should have just scrapped it or went back to the drawing board and made another movie, maybe if it was going to be that big of a mess, they just decided to release their incomplete product and figure it would make a lot of money, and that wasn't the case. Every other movie on this list that I really didn't like, but I can't attack the integrity of it. Even Ted 2, which I really hated, and I've gotten to not like Seth MacFarlane. He was trying to make a comedy movie, and while I didn't find it funny, the rest of the theater was laughing. So it accomplished something. To me, this is Fantastic Four is particularly offensive because I think it only exists to try to take money from me. That the studio decided we're going to put it out. It doesn't quite work, but we're going to put out this, cut some scenes together, patch up the movie, and release it just because it'll make money. And I find that particularly offensive, and that's what made it the worst movie of the year to me. There was things I saw that were maybe worse, but there was nothing I saw that was as egregious as that. It was just awful. Whoever was responsible for that should be fired. I understand the director had a lot of issues. I don't know what his vision was, but I can't imagine it was as bad as what they put out. Uh, that it was just an embarrassment. I was embarrassed watching it, and I hope the folks at Fox are embarrassed for having put it out. Although I don't think that's the case. What did you think my worst movie of the year was? Did you think anything on my list was really wrong and not that bad, or even good? I suspect the only one anyone would really disagree with me on would be Ted 2. But that's, comedy's really subjective. So if you like Ted 2, if you liked any of these movies, please don't take what I say personal, especially in the case of Ted 2, because if you thought it was funny, then forget what I have to say, because if you laughed, then the movie seemed to accomplish what it set out to. Thanks for watching.